It's been a while since I've done a ranking video, and I always enjoy them. This time, I wanted to do another ranking similar to my Scorsese ranking, and rank all of one director's feature narrative films. This director just so happens to be very inspired by Scorsese's work, and of course, since you've already clicked on the video, you know exactly who I'm talking about. One Paul Thomas Anderson. He is known for his young start in the film industry and his striking and sprawling stories of ebbs and flows of power dynamics, from cults to small romances, from 3-hour series of coincidences to the rise of a corrupt oil industry. He may not have the most movies, but the career he's had has cemented him as one of the most interesting working directors today. I'm not going to break this into tiers like I normally would because he only has 9 movies, unfortunately not including Junun, because A, it's not a narrative film, and B, it's seemingly nowhere to be found. But we're gonna hop right into it. Though I feel a little out of place, somehow it's become December, and that wasn't supposed to happen for this video, but I guess it's a Christmas video now, so I guess we better get on theme. Whoa! You don't want to go down there. Alright, let's hop right in. At number 9, we have Hard 8, 1996. Pretty unsurprisingly, Paul's first feature film is undoubtedly his weakest, but I will say it's a lot more for its scripting and pacing than you might think coming into his career at the age of 25, and it's by no means bad. I think what really sticks out first and most apparent when you first start this movie, if you're at all familiar with Scorsese's work, is just how derivative this is. Which is fine, you know, you need to take strong inspirations from people when you start out, and you might as well pick one of the best filmmakers out there. But this early on, the stylistic similarities to works like Casino and Goodfellas and the plotting similarities to The Color of Money just remind you that you could be watching a better movie than what we get here. And what's funny is they end up running into some of my same complaints that I actually have about Casino by making their characters and some of their drama so unlikable and so annoying that it makes me kind of want to tune out to what the story is doing. This happens for me with John C. Reilly's John and Gwyneth Paltrow throughout the course of the movie, where their actions just seem so bad and ill-advised because that's what they wanted for the plot, and not because it serves the story or the themes in like an annoying sense. Obviously, I don't care if the people are bad people. This is unfortunate because I really like how Sidney is written and portrayed by Philip Baker Hall. It's done really well, and I liked most of the scenes he was in, but he's just kind of foreshadowed by the plot being a little sloppy and annoying at parts. This paired with the shaky, still finding its footing, direction, and style, and the wonky pacing that drags in the second act, makes for a film it's fine. It has some good ideas, though they're mostly borrowed, and the execution is pretty good, especially for a filmmaker of his age, and I didn't dislike it. Still, I don't think I'd ever go out of my way to watch this again, which I can't even say for Casino or The Color of Money, which aren't even my favorites from Scorsese. You could tell that it's really his writing that needs the most improvement in this. I gave it a 3 out of 5. Up next at number 8, Inherent Vice 2014. I feel like the moment I get into any other movies, I'm going to be moving into like hot take territory, simply because so many people love PTA's movies so much that I'm sure this is probably somebody's favorite film, and they're furious at me putting it at number 8. And again, we started with a 3 out of 5, and it can only get better, so it's not like I dislike any of these films. Anyway, Inherent Vice is a very unique film, even within PTA's work, both in the way it's written and the way it's directed. The film follows down on his luck, drugged out Doc Sportello, played by Joaquin Phoenix, as he goes down an increasingly convoluted rabbit hole to find out what happened to his ex-girlfriend. Now, I know Inherent Vice fans are cringing when I say convoluted, because one of the biggest complaints you hear about this movie, or sometimes one of the biggest praises, is that the plot is so confusing that it's almost hard to follow. This is not what I think, and even though it's a little convoluted, I don't think that's a bad thing. As Doc goes through the movie, one of the key focuses is the fact that with how much weed he smokes, he's actually losing his memory to some extent. He can't remember specifics, whole memories seem to be a haze, and because he's high most of the movie, even the investigation itself is unconventional at best. This makes the plot run through so many different twists and turns with misinformation and confusion and paths that lead nowhere, and the eventual stumbling onto solutions. In my opinion, this works really well. I thought that the atmosphere that the film cultivates with this darting around style really benefited the movie, and I never felt like I was actually confused or struggling to follow the overall plot. You just may not know where you're at scene by scene. I also liked a lot of the movie's humor, even if it can be a little bizarre and a little out of left field. It's interesting how little they really relied on overt jokes, though there are quite a few. It's not really comparable to something like The Nice Guys, which I would say is a very similar film, and instead it plays most of its comedy simply off of its characters, the performances, and their reactions to the silly investigations around them. Adding to the list of things I enjoy about this movie would be the overarching themes, even if I don't think they're quite as effective and engaging as they could have been. But there's a very strong sense throughout this movie of empathy and making fun of Doc for the situation he's in. The way he lives his life is unusual and definitely funny throughout the film, but the reason he lives life the way he does to some extent is understandable. The movie plays around with the reasons the drug industry is so strong and the constant need for escape from the way American society, especially in the 70s all the way up to today, is, and what to do in the face of all that coping, leading you to feel like most things are meaningless. It plays this out into a really compelling story about resilience and beauty, even for someone who lives as sad of a life as Doc, someone who can barely remember his ex, who was also the only person who gave him reasons to keep on living. The tonal balance of this is surprisingly effective, making for a light, funny neo-noir that still packs a lot of punch and social commentary that makes the noir genre work. However, it's also just not my thing, which is strange to me because I love neo-noirs. I love noirs in general, but I found myself pretty disconnected from the characters here, and despite liking the overall themes of the movie and thinking it worked, it never fully clicked in a way that I would have wanted, leaving me wanting a little bit more from just about every aspect. Doc and Bigfoot and all our other wacky cast of characters mostly fade from my thoughts after watching the movie, and if you ask me for something in the stoner neo-noir genre, I would think of The Big Lebowski, or The Nice Guys, or even Under the Silver Lake 20 times before I ever thought of Inherent Vice. So that's why this ends up so low for me, which I think is a little disappointing because this seems like it should be a film that I love more. It's still, though, a 4 out of 5. At number 7, we have Boogie Nights, 1997. I'm kind of dreading talking about this one a little bit because there's just so much you could talk about when reviewing this movie, and I totally get why so many people love it. PTA's second feature film, and out of the gate, you can feel him flexing so much more than Hard 8, picking up a concept that he used in a short film at 18 to make a harrowing, funny, mismatched story of the 70s porn industry. I even wrote in my initial review of this movie that it feels really hard to talk about this movie because of the way criticism is around it, as many of the top reviews on Letterboxd are either Dirk Diggler saved my sex life, marriage, and quite possibly my life, and PTA is a Scorsese Altman ripoff hack who just wanted to make a scummy film about boobs and doesn't have a single bit of talent in his body. And Boogie Nights killed my grandma. So it just really feels like you're poking the bear to have a bit more of a nuanced take on this film, which is, in my opinion, mostly good. Mostly good things. It's just muddled and maybe even a little bit problematic from its immaturity. Having just come off of a bit of a Baker binge for Anora and seeing how he approaches the sex industry versus this movie made by a 27-year-old in the 90s, it can definitely make me a little nervous at times. However, it usually has something relatively nuanced to say. but the kind of thesis Baker can pull from his mixed portrayals of the lives of sex workers, even in Baker's not perfect and sometimes questionable decisions in his filmmaking, the humanity and highs and lows of what that industry can do, and why it's part of humanity, and why the people in it matter, are what shine through the most, no matter how comedic or even exploitative his movies can get. This movie uses as a backdrop to make a film about the change in American culture, and really in a singular character's life. And it can often treat sex work as a punchline, not unlike Red Rocket at times, but certainly with less to say, sometimes hitting strange lows like with characters like Philip Seymour Hoffman's Scotty, and their strange journey and portrayal of a gay man as little more than a pervert who even makes Dirk Diggler uncomfortable with his actions. Though it tries to settle him well by having him still be friends with Dirk's friend group as they spiral in life. Little Bill also stands out just as strong, as seemingly being something just thrown in for a little more shock value at the turn of the decade, and I don't really know what they were really trying to say with that. And this kind of glossing over of events for vague thematic reasons continues throughout the entire movie, even with our main character Dirk, who is unfortunately played by Mark Wahlberg of all people, and his scenes in the truck. It's just saying, here's Dirk at his low point, with little commentary on anything else about that scene. Or heck, the Colonel stuff, or the robbery scene. The list just goes on of mostly in the second act actions that just fall a little flat and get trampled over by this film's want to tell a massive narrative. It feels a lot like Magnolia, but I would say Magnolia, despite its problems, is a lot more fleshed out than this movie because it doesn't have nearly as much of this for as melodramatic as it can be. I know what it wants to say, and it uses its characters to say it really efficiently, never usually making people just pawns or punchlines. You can already tell that Anderson is getting a little bit too big for his britches, but even so, this film, despite all the odds, works. It's a really great time, and even when not all of its themes are landing in any given scene, you're usually having fun, or at least are somewhat invested in what's going on. This film does an amazing job balancing its ensemble of weird found family in a way that really makes you feel for them, even the ones that you don't get to know as well as I'd like Roller Girl. But Burt Reynolds as Jack Horner is surprisingly compelling, and so is Don Cheadle's Buck. These characters just kind of sneak up on you for how much you end up caring for them by the end. This film, far more so than Hard Eight, has the juice, and there are some simply incredible scenes here and there, and the camera feels really natural and fun for the most part. While it's still pretty heavily leaning on its inspirations, you can feel Anderson's style start to wake up as he stretches his muscles. It's just a shame that, the entire plot of the movie revolves around Mark Wahlberg's dick. I give it a 4 out of 5. Coming in at number 6, we have Licorice Pizza 2021, PTA's most recent film. This was a very strange film for me at the stage of life when I watched this, especially now looking back at it, having seen all of Paul Thomas Anderson's, movies. It's set in Paul's hometown and the time he grew up, and seems to be a love letter and tough relationship grappling with Anderson's childhood and what it means to grow up. It's a really interesting film, honestly, sometimes more than I think people give it credit for. The movie itself is a pretty simple slice-of-life movie following our really engaging leads of Alana, played by Alana Haim, and Gary, played by Cooper Hoffman, as they have what seems to be a strange, illegal, age-gapped relationship between them, the older Alana and the immature Gary. Alana stays our point of view character for most of the film, and is really what sells the strange, problematic, and illegal romance for me. And by that I don't mean that, I agree with the romance, I'm just saying, they make the film really, they make it work. I'm gonna make a bunch of mouth noises into the microphone. I'm having a lot of trouble recording this segment for some reason. Anyway, the writing and Alana's breakout performance really sells you on this 20-something-year-old's life and how she's lost her way, stuck in a sucky job, living at home with no real idea of what she wants to do or what she wants to be. Played off really well by the immature Gary, who is the exact opposite. He seems to know everyone, have a clear set out path, and is resilient even in the face of his dumb schemes and business plans going haywire. This story really plays well to the point that I was at when I first watched it, and the ebb and flow of these two characters as ideas, and to a larger extent ideals, really makes for a compelling story that I always get emotionally drawn into. Even the ending has so much nuance as Alana chooses to run after Gary yet again, rejecting the paths she's tried to make in a career of facades and chasing a younger, more optimistic self, one that's not really meant for her and that is bad for her. It's easily one of the most interesting scripts that Paul has done to me personally as someone in their 20s who's trying really hard to figure out life. On top of that, this movie does a pretty good job at being consistently funny. For my money, this is one of the funniest films that PTA has done, although not everything lands, and there was quite a bit of debate over this movie when it first came out, especially towards its more problematic elements, such as the relationship. Though again, it being problematic is kind of the point of the movie, and I think like very much so with the themes, but more seriously to the weird racist stuff that's in this movie. Allegedly, PTA put it in to make it feel like more accurate to the time period he grew up in, and while that argument certainly could work, and it's rare to get such racist things from one of his movies, I do think the movie would just hands down be better without it in there, especially being that much of it doesn't serve a purpose in the scenes it's in. It's not funny. It doesn't work like an Always Sunny in Philadelphia moment where the comedy is how awful these people are, or even like a Nathan Fielder or Borat kind of moment where the comedy is how it makes people uncomfortable and pushes social boundaries in an ironic way. There's just like a couple scenes with racism in them with a weirdly comedic tone, even though it doesn't land and it's really uncomfortable and lame. But outside of these couple scenes, I think the comedy lands. There are some all-time side characters and fun cameos. Benny Safdie, that one Skylar kid, I can't remember his name, and my personal favorite, Bradley Cooper. It's just like a nice movie to sit in and really makes you feel nostalgic, which is like kind of the whole point of the movie, is to fall in love with your childhood self, even when that's not a good idea, even when you're romanticizing that childhood. But I do think mass audiences might not have been so mixed on it if it focused more on making its themes a little less abstract with its characters, because I think it could, and was by a lot of people, pretty easily read as a weird legal age gap style nostalgia movie with some racism, and I honestly don't think that that is a fair reading of the movie for what it's trying to do. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5. At number 5 we have Magnolia, 1999. So a couple of years after PTA's breakout Boogie Nights, he would make an even bigger, even bolder ensemble film that plays almost thematically as a companion piece to Boogie Nights, looking forward to the future with unknowing, grieving optimism that maybe things, no matter how hard, happen for a reason. It's hard to really talk about this film in any substantial way within the ranking here, but what's really so impressive here is how it balances all of these characters into a solid emotional and almost spiritual experience. It really is a lot like a film I would want to write in terms of overall premise of all of these interconnected lives. But I will say, despite all the incredible writing that we have on display here, the weaving of characters, the balancing of screen time, the dialogue, it's just way too long. It just doesn't fully work. PTA himself will now fully admit this. Now, I love long movies. Some of my favorite movies are well over 2.5 hours. Heck, some of them are well over 3 hours. One of them is even 5 hours. So it's not the runtime itself, but the pacing and the way the movie drags throughout the second act really makes it feel like it takes a lot of effort to get the characters where they need to be, instead of everything flowing as naturally as it could. But outside of this, I don't have too much to add. There's clearly some standout performances, especially from Tom Cruise, whose entire character is such a great portrayal, especially living in an era where Andrew Tate is a thing, where the psychological look into that kind of alpha male society and their leaders is like really genuinely interesting and I think, emotionally potent and important. Julianne Moore and William H. Macy and our child actor Jeremy Blackman all just kill it. Everyone in this just feels so real and fully realized in a way that you wouldn't expect from this movie, especially it being PTA's third movie. This movie can be a bit much, but it showed for all time what PTA was capable of, and the ending remains one of my favorite endings in movies that I've ever seen. It had me crying and ascending to another plane. I mean, it's one of my favorite things when a movie can make me believe in the impossible, believe that the world has magic. And this movie does that like almost no other movie I've seen before, while also having really interesting commentary on the American life in the 90s. Amazing picture. 4.5 out of 5. My throat is gonna be dead. It's too cold. At number 4, There Will Be Blood, 2007. Again, I feel like I'm stepping on everyone's toes with each slot of this ranking, but from here on out especially, these movies are pretty much all masterpieces to me and each hold a special place in my heart. This even more so because it was the first PTA movie I watched, and of course it kinda blew my mind. There's so much to love about this movie. The sweeping cinematography, the powerful score, just one of my straight up favorite movie scores out ever, the electric performances from Daniel Day-Lewis and Paul Dano, and the absolute biblical stakes given to the tension. It feels like you're watching a chapter out of the American Bible. It's true American mythos, captured at the turn of the century, and the rise of what would make America into the greatest industrial country, for whatever that's worth, and whatever it takes to get there. You can go complete video essay brained with like every element of this movie and pick it apart to a goofy degree, from the opening perfectly silently setting up the kind of person Daniel Plainview is, to the scenes with his brother Henry and how he feels when he thinks he's found somebody who is actually like him, to the religious scenes and the power abuse of the American church that are as foundational to our country as the industrial abuse. It's such an easy movie to pick apart, and makes you want to read the book it's based on for how insightful it feels towards early American social status and power structures. But what really proves how good this film is beyond all that is that this film has one of my single favorite sequences in film that I have ever seen, that works amazing as an act break, a chilling character commentary on Daniel's greed, and is one of the most viscerally thrilling and beautiful sequences ever. The oil fire scene. YouTube probably won't be able to do this film justice, and I curse the fact that I was but a wee child when this film came out, so I had no chance to go see it in theaters. But if you can, watch this movie, or even just this scene, on the biggest screen possible with the best sound. Do it. It will change your life. The lighting, the power of the fire, the power of the money, what it means, the death, the loss of HW's hearing, and Daniel's reaction to it, it's so good, and a perfect encapsulation of why I love this movie. And I really can't say enough how good like every other element is. The pacing and structure somehow don't drag when pretty much all that happens is a man starting an oil company, a son growing up, a pastor being like, and a couple people dying. And the performances are legendary, and I mean like actually legendary. I've always said if there's a really, really good performance, people can easily do impressions of it and make fun of it, and there's nothing easier or more fun than making fun of Daniel Day-Lewis or Paul Dano, with Daniel Day-Lewis's pure hatred and greed coming through with every self-loathing, overdramatic, and iconic line like the "I drank your milkshake" scene, and Paul Dano's pure physical control, both in the way he plays Paul and Eli differently, but also how Eli stalks around and lacks physical prowess, so instead he wields only his self-righteousness as his cutting blade, which holds up in sickening and hilarious ways against Daniel's efforts. This movie is a masterpiece, and I'm glad this introduced me to what PTA could do with film. I gave it a 5 out of 5. At number 3, The Master, 2012. Okay, this one might actually go up in the ranking a little bit with some rewatches. As of writing this video, I've only seen it once, which doesn't really compare to like the mini rewatches of most of the other of these films. But what sits at number 1 and number 2 are like, I don't know, it's hard to top them. But man, this film is incredible. The visuals of this movie are honestly one of the immediate standouts. Not that the visuals of PTA movies, at least The ones once he truly finds his footing aren't usually amazing, but these play a bit different than what you usually get from PTA, making this one of the sharpest and intimately cold-feeling movies I've ever seen. By intimately cold, I mean the camera is constantly distancing us from the people we're seeing. Their lives, their struggles are far enough away to never feel in our control, but that the way we see things, the angles and the subtleties of the placements, put us in increasingly intimate positions as these characters descend through their madness. It's beautiful, and the score is yet again one of my favorites. This movie, on the whole, really impressed me with what it was able to accomplish with its premise that a lesser writer could have easily gone over the top and made into a ridiculous fantasy. As is, this exploration of cults and power dynamics of everyday philosophy is one of the most nuanced I've ever seen, or even at its most fantastical, most cheesy, cult-feeling moments, it feels grounded because these characters feel real. They have needs, doubts, wants, and they all serve a master, even the master himself. This movie excited me first for having Philip Seymour Hoffman and Amy Adams, two of my favorite actors, as some of our leads, and man does it deliver with its acting, doing so much even just with their relationship dynamic. Hoffman's Dodd is the perfect cult leader. He's charismatic, he's smart, and most of all, he's halfway correct. His perspective on life that we see as his shield is taken down around Joaquin Phoenix's Freddy doesn't just make sense, it's understandable as to why he would have started the cult in the first place and what he wants to do. What he wants to offer people is a place to belong, and he uses half-correct psychological principles to somewhat help people, while also doing what all cults do and steering people towards dangerous ideology and rhetoric in a way that grows far out of his control. Now, I've never been the biggest Phoenix fan, but man, what he does here really works. His character is gross and loud and violent and everything that Dodd isn't. They are perfect for each other, and Freddy's vaguely sympathetic backstory and PTSD make him such an interesting sleazeball to see play off a man who wants to seem so wise and composed. Why is Dodd attracted to Freddy, and why is Freddy attracted to Dodd? Why do they separate? Why does the cult not want Freddy? All of these are interesting questions that come up that don't just play to keep the narrative moving, but also that serve as an interesting commentary not just on religious philosophies, but on much grander philosophies in the truth of human existence, and how all of us end up serving something within us, and why we almost always long for what we're not. It's beautiful and has some really amazing scenes and has some of the best acting you'll ever see. It's harrowing, thrilling, dramatic, deeply sad, empathetic, and incredible. I gave it a 5 out of 5. At number 2 we have Punch Drunk Love 2002. Punch Drunk Love is truly perhaps one of the defining movies of PTA's career. Without it, as far as we know, he could still be making Scorsese knockoffs. Punch Drunk Love, his next film after the towering Boogie Nights and Magnolia, is a small, low-budget film set in only a couple locations, shot in one of the most subtle and toned-back styles that we've ever gotten from PTA, that sets out to tell the story of one man and his quest to accept himself and find someone who loves him for who he is. It is everything that Magnolia is not, and within that, the magic of what Paul Thomas Anderson can do was born. The rhythm this movie has, and the subtle editing and lighting choices make it a movie that will lull you into believing that love is truly the most magical force in the world, and can bring even the loneliest, most troubled people into a better tomorrow. And it does this all with Adam Sandler. It was easily his single standout performance before Uncut Gems. Adam Sandler's Barry Egan is perhaps one of, if not the most important character to me on this list. One of the main reasons for that is the way he is portrayed and written. Now, this runs into speculation territory, as they never wanted to officially give Barry a diagnosis or write him based on any one thing, but if you watch this movie, it's very clear that Barry struggles with something. The movie itself mostly just calls it anger issues. Some have said that he's on the spectrum, is bipolar, and many, many other things. I would personally most strongly lean towards him being on the spectrum, as I am on the spectrum, and I very much relate towards him as a character. the way he struggles with his emotions and understanding people around him, the anger this brings him when it feels like the world doesn't work the way that he wants it to, and all he can do is make mistakes, and the strength he has to accomplish his goals no matter what, all while being a socially anxious nightmare, is just like, it's just like, it really taps into that. It really hits home for me. And what brings him to a healthier and happier place in life is finding someone who loves him for who he is, and who puts effort to try and understand and learn despite their many ups and downs, and someone who also pushes Barry to be a better person. Now, I do see why they would try to avoid saying he's on the spectrum or anything in particular, because this movie does get pretty fantastical and shows Barry at times being violent, like in the bathroom when he tears up the entire place, and when he ends up getting scammed, and Emily Watson's Lena ends up getting hurt, pitting Barry in a battle against the Mattress Man, played by Philip Seymour Hoffman. He ends up like beating up a bunch of people and getting really mad, and it just really wouldn't be a great thing to do. So I'm glad they kept it more ambiguous, and in this way more people can relate to it as they wish. But man, Barry is such an impactful and beautiful character to me. One thing this movie is also often criticized for is a lack of Lena having agency and characterization, which I will definitely agree with, but I don't really think lands as too big of a problem for me with the very small scale and the one thing this movie was trying to do with its perspectives, following Barry exclusively, and the more fantastical nature of its magic romance. You get a good sense that Lena definitely likes him, especially since she's the one who initiates their relationship, and you often see her setting boundaries with Barry and criticizing him for when his behavior is not acceptable. And you see that she genuinely likes Barry and all his quirks despite this, and that Barry likes her. So while I can definitely understand that line of criticism, for me personally it just didn't take away from the movie that much, and I just love what this movie is doing and how it makes me feel, and Barry as a character so much that I can't not adore it. And it really made a major shift in what PTA was doing stylistically. This setting of the ebb and flow between different dynamics scene to scene, and that overall pacing and sense of rhythm is what I think of as the defining feature of Paul Thomas Anderson's actual style. Almost all of my favorites from him have this feeling to them, like There Will Be Blood, and even like our next movie. But anyway, I gave this a 5 out of 5. The number 1 slot is Phantom Thread 2017. Despite what you may think from my more personal, long-winded ramblings from the last two films, this isn't even something that I think personally, changed my life or anything. It's just genuinely what I think is one of the most perfectly constructed movies that I've ever seen, and is also a blast, and dramatic, and spiritual, and exciting, and funny, and thrilling, and I could literally watch it anytime, and I have, and I show this to anyone I can, including my girlfriend, which was very funny. This is genuinely my favorite movie score ever, probably, just hands down. When I think about good movie scores, this is the first score that pops into my head. I am turning this on all the time. PTA's collaborations with Jonny Greenwood are insane, and I seriously can't think of better music. This is also maybe Daniel Day-Lewis's final return, in which he fully embodies this cursed, deliciously petty man in Reynolds Woodcock. But of course, standout of this movie is really Vicky Krieps as Alma. Never before do you see a character from PTA who is this likable, this tenacious, this determined, and never breaks under the pressure of Reynolds wants to marry his mom Woodcock. The movie slowly lulls you in with its beauty and genuine romance in the first half before descending slowly into the madness of a relationship built around power and success. And things get more and more out of hand, and our two leads do one of the most gripping battles of manipulation, love, and determination to change their ever-stilted relationship into what they each want from it. You love them, and you understand them, and you hate them. And all of this while you see some of the most beautiful scenes around you, and you get to understand why Reynolds and Alma are the way that they are. The way that Reynolds' struggling childhood led him to believe that he was cursed and even haunted not to find love, and how it's hardened him and made him obsessed with success and making everything in his life as perfect as it can be, although it never lasts, which is why he always attributes it to his curse deep down. And Alma, who works her way to what she wants from nothing with sheer determination and love in her heart. forced and waiting to craft the world of men to her will, in the end they find what works perfect for them and their twisted ups and downs of two emotionally unstable and needy 40-year-olds. But they love each other, and they hate each other. They complete each other, and they are nuisances to each other. It again is a movie that makes me believe in magic, but in this sense, a much subtler and darker magic. One that leaves none of us without our curses that sometimes only other people can help us find. No matter how messy, it's beautiful and it's silly, and Reynolds is so funny. He's like the most babyish person you'll ever see, and I literally made a whole edit around him. It's amazing.
Stupid boy think that I need him.
I cannot begin my day with a confrontation, please.
I go red hot like
And that ending and the ghost scene, like, this movie is so good. And I seriously debated for a long time on the top 3 of this list, but I knew from the very beginning that I would definitely put this movie at the top, no matter how I kept shuffling things. It's truly one of the best movies I've ever seen, and it somehow clears all other PTA movies for me in terms of overall tightness, emotion, entertainment, engagement, beauty, and resonance. Watch it if you haven't. I gave it a 5 out of 5. And so we've come to the end of PTA's movies so far, and it's strange to talk about. I really love these top movies so much, and yet PTA is never really a director who stood out to me as like what I would say is one of my favorites. He makes fantastic films and doesn't really have a bad film in his filmography, but his style isn't always my thing. But when he does what he does best, he makes some of the best movies on power dynamics throughout different lenses, creating truly some of the most magical movies that make me just want to get out there and make films and fall in love and get in nature and listen to a beautiful piece of music or paint something. His best films connect to something deeply human and deeply artistic, and I cannot recommend really any of this top 4 enough. But anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. This isn't really what I was planning on doing for my December video. I hadn't really planned anything, but I usually try and do themed videos. But then Thanksgiving was 2 days before the end of the month, and that kind of snuck up on me. So maybe I'll get another video out this December. We'll see. There's Nosferatu coming out in literally 20 days. That's freaking insane, and I'm so excited for that. I may be more excited for that than Christmas. But happy holidays, everyone. Enjoy whatever you enjoy during December. I am currently way too cold. I long for the sunny days of summer. Though that's really kind of early for that. I long for the jacket weather of fall. It is freezing and I have to scrape ice off of the windshield of my car to go to work in the morning. But thank you guys for watching. If you liked this video, please consider liking and commenting and subscribing. Tell me your ranking of his movies. There's really not that many, so it's pretty likely that you've seen all of them. Or just tell me your favorite from him. Please consider, if you can, joining my membership for as little as $1 a month. It'll give you early access to videos, exclusive videos, and a bunch of other features. It would really mean the world to me, as I'm really struggling in some ways. And I am trying to get financial stability while also paying for school, so being able to make a little money off of this would mean that I can actually give it the time that I need to consistently put stuff out. I still am always going to try my hardest to make this free for you guys and to give you the best videos that I can make. I love making YouTube videos, but if you guys could support me, that would mean the world to me, and that would also mean that you've really connected and resonated with my videos, which would also mean the world to me. But anyway, that's enough plugging. I love you all. Happy holidays and goodbye. Lovely. That's why I think that all of my opinions are right and all of yours are wrong.